Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Keegan. My name is James. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. Um, I know we did the set aside prayer, but I also like to, whenever I'm sharing, I like to also do the prayer on page 76 of the Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the 7-step prayer. If you guys want to join me real quick. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. I like that prayer. It's an important one when we're doing the step work, but also I always like to be reminded of why I'm here and what I'm doing. I want to know that, this isn't really about me. This is about me trying to do my higher power's will, right? And that usually involves trying to help somebody else, especially if they're an alcoholic like I am. So I thank you guys for joining me. We're going to talk about step 12 today. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I'll talk about my experience doing this. I'll try to break down, this step the best I can, and we'll do some reading out of the big book, which is where all the instructions are. So anything that I tell you is 99% probably come out of the big book, or been taught to me by my own sponsor, or it's my own experience doing this, some practical experience. As I mentioned earlier, if I get a little goofy, I apologize. I'm on about 3 hours of sleep, but I will say that I'm pretty pumped up for this because I had the opportunity to work with a new recruit last night. So this brings me to something I want to talk about, which is in the last 2 weeks or so, it's been interesting. Something I noted when I was thinking about what to talk about today and how to talk about this. I've been asked lately to be of service quite a bit. And whenever I start getting a lot of people asking me for help, right, whether it's taking them through the steps or they're asking me to speak at a meeting for them, when that starts happening in bunches, I typically like to reflect on it and try to ask myself, well, why is this? When I do 10 and 11, a lot of what I'm doing, other than identifying what's going on with me and moving it out of the way, is asking God's will of me and asking what God would have me do and trying to improve on that. So when things go good or bad, I want to know, what is God trying to tell me? And I'm about to start school. And my plan this last 2 weeks wasn't to get a bunch of new sponsees because I'm going to be very busy when the school starts. That wasn't my plan. My plan these last 2 weeks was definitely to try to get prepared for school and get ahead a little bit. Instead, I've been mostly doing step work with other alcoholics. And I've been sharing at meetings about the solution. And I look at that and I'm like, God, what are you trying to tell me? Well, the previous school semester, I had a rough time. I didn't have as many sponsees, and I didn't have a lot of time. I wasn't being asked to share at meetings. I didn't have too much time to be carrying this message to other alcoholics like I normally would like to. And, things got a little rough, surprise, surprise, right? I'm still doing 10 and 11, but, things get a little rough when we omit something like step 12, something that's very vital to my own recovery. So here's God going, okay, remember what's important, right? Remember why you're even able to go to school in the first place. And we'll talk about that a little more, how God is doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. So if we're going to talk about step 12, I think it's important that from my own experience, the first requirement, if I'm going to pass a solution on to somebody else, is that I've done the steps myself. I know that sounds like something that should be obvious, but it's not to quite a few people. That's been my experience going to meetings and doing this stuff. I the new recruit I was speaking to last night told me some horror stories about the first two sponsors that he had. Um, you know, I used to think some things that my own sponsors, my sponsor, my grand sponsor, and other people would joke about, right? Like, oh, yeah, well, a sponsor, his job is to have you mow his lawn or to do favors for him, right? Because he's helping you out and all this stuff. And then you hear another person who's suffering from, this disease, and they're having people in the rooms actually demand stuff of them and try to tell them where to go to buy new tires and how to live their life, and they're coming down on them hard and trying to direct them in their everyday affairs, almost like they're trying to be the higher power. So I think if in my experience, if anybody is going to carry this message, they better have worked the solution themselves. And having said that, I also have found that I never really learned the solution very well until I taught it to somebody else. That's just been my experience, and there's no other way to put it. I understood it as good as I could, but having to explain it to somebody else and to take them through and see them do this stuff and what's working for them and what's helping them allows me to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Um, there's nothing like and that I've ever done like taking an alcoholic through this solution. There's nothing like it. Whether they continue to do it or they fall by the wayside because they're not ready, there's nothing like doing this. I would go so far as to say from my own experience that doing step 12 with another alcoholic is one of the few real things in my life, if that makes any sense. One of the few things that feels like I'm doing something that actually is making a difference. I can work for money. I can go to school for an education. I can get things. I can lose things. But those things pale in comparison to building an actual connection with another human being, right? Especially one who's suffering. So the book tells us this experience is not to be missed for a reason, right? So first thing is, if I'm going to take somebody through the solution, I better have done 4 through 9, right? And I better be doing 10 and 11 so that I keep myself spiritually fit and I'm able to do this effectively. And that brings me to another question, right? That I don't think is answered enough, and that is, what is a sponsor, right? I mean, the term sponsor, it actually gets confused a lot for a lot of things, right? I was confused myself when I first started this because I knew kind of what my job was, but I didn't know how much of all the other things I was supposed to do or not do. And thankfully, we have a book, the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, that isn't just a list of the steps like you see in the rooms. It contains instructions, and it contains very specific instructions and also a lot of practical experience that can help us if we are uncertain about what we're doing when we're working with others. And I just want to start by a few notes that I've taken out of working with others. And if you want to know, I feel like if you want to know what a sponsor is, it's also important to understand what a sponsor is not. A sponsor, according to this book, is not a banker for alcoholic sprees, right? A sponsor may give their home up for a while for a sponsee, but it's not necessarily, I'm not to be their landlord. And it cautions us against letting a sponsee stay with us for too long because we may harm them. A sponsor isn't someone that necessarily takes care of all the material needs of a sponsee, although this chapter definitely does talk about providing some material assistance if needed. right? But it also cautions us to do that sparingly and to think before we do it. I think the important thing to remember is that overall, in my experience, a sponsor can also be called a step guide, and that's really what I try to be more than anything. What I really have that can be of use is not money. It's not a place to stay. It's that I have a solution that works for me and that could save their life. So I would say, how I've defined being a sponsor, right, or a step guide, is I'm someone who had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, and I've recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, and I carry this message to other alcoholics, right? And that message is that there is a solution. There's a solution. There's a way out of this. And that's why in the foreword of this book, it says, "We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show others precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book." And that's my main purpose as well as a step guide. Money may help them temporarily, shelter may help them temporarily, but if they're able to pick up this kit of spiritual tools that I'm able to lay at their feet and run with it, it may provide something actually lasting. They might be able to gain a relationship with a power greater than themselves, which will save their life, but also improve upon their life, like it's done for me. I'm going to start in the very beginning of the chapter and just read a little bit. So, working with others. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. So, the main reason I'm able to secure another alcoholic's confidence when others fail is because they may identify with me when I speak to them, when I hear their story and they hear mine. Hopefully, they see some commonalities in there. When they hear, that I've drank like them, they're more apt to think I understand. We're going to understand when others don't. This paragraph is followed by some of these 12-step promises. Life will take on new meaning. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish. Loneliness vanishes for us, I think, because once we get back into this, alcohol takes us out of the tribe, right? We're social creatures. It tends to, our actions while drinking tend to ruin our relationships. So by doing this and helping somebody else, I can see that loneliness vanish as they re-enter the tribe of society, right? To have a host of friends, to see a fellowship grow up about you. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss this. Now, I think I've noticed a lot of these promises in the books, whether it's the 9-step promises we read at meetings, a lot of them come with conditions. And I think this also states a condition at the bottom. It says frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. I think that's a condition because if I want these promises to come true, I better have frequent contact with newcomers, which typically are untreated alcoholics that don't yet have a solution. So we know maybe now what a sponsor is, why they're necessary. So the question a lot of us may have is like, where do I find somebody to help? Right? Once again, we have this book who gives some really definite and valuable suggestions about how to do that or where to do that. Perhaps you are not acquainted with any drinkers who want to recover. You can easily find some by asking a few doctors, ministers, priests, or hospitals. My own experience is that I've found a majority of my sponsees, my potential recruits at the rehab that I attended originally. That's a great place. They're coming in constantly. Unfortunately, a lot of our rehab system now gets people in and out pretty quick here in the States, which can be rough to try to get them through this stuff. But it's helped me to get these people on a 4-step quickly and work the solution quickly as designed in the book. Because when they leave, I want them to have a solution that, once again, may save their life. And this is a little out of order of what I wanted to talk about, but I do want to say too, like, it's always important to remember, for me, and I get reminded of it sadly quite a bit, how deadly this disease is. For somebody who's recovered like me, sometimes I can forget how dire it was. And unfortunately, part of doing this is being reminded that this disease, the final bottom for all of us, is death if left untreated. And, you know, I've had several friends and past sponsees that have passed away, unfortunately, of this disease. And that's always a crushing blow to see somebody that you really hope to help no longer be here anymore. So that kind of stuff drives me to keep doing what I'm doing, because somebody saved my life by doing this. So these are sick people, and they really need our help. These doctors, ministers, and priests or hospitals, they will be only too glad to assist you. And I found that to be true as well too. The rehab that I'm at encourages us to show up and try to help these alcoholics out. It reminds us here not to start out as an evangelist or a reformer. Unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists. You'll be handicapped if you arouse it. So in my experience with this, I can't force this on anyone. I'm a very spiritual person who knows this program works, but it doesn't mean that somebody else is going to see it that way right away. So if I'm too, too heavy-handed with it in a way, it may turn some people off. I don't know if you guys can relate to this as alcoholics, but especially in my drinking, you couldn't tell me anything. If I wasn't done and you tried to tell me you have to do this, or you're going to die and all this stuff, like I probably wouldn't hear you. I didn't want to be lectured. To be helpful is our only aim, and I think it's important to remember that when we're doing what we're doing. Ministers and doctors are competent, and you can learn much from them if you wish. But it happens that because of your own drinking experience, you can be uniquely useful to other alcoholics. So cooperate, never criticize. And this is an important sentence. To be helpful is our only aim. That's the attitude I always have when I'm trying to work with somebody new. So then we're going to get down into some instructions here. Okay, but before we do that, I kind of want to break down step 12 because I think it kind of has 3 parts to it from my own experience and how I read this book. First, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, right? I talked before about how I think it's vitally important that I've had that spiritual awakening as a result of the solution before I carry it to somebody else. So the second part of this step, tried to carry this message to other alcoholics, right? Which is kind of the center point of step 12. Once I have that spiritual solution as a result of the steps, I'm going to carry it to somebody else. And then 3, we're suggested to practice these principles in all our affairs. So the first part of that is going to require some discussion, I think, of the solution and the other steps. having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. So I think it's very important to understand, once again, so I can help others ultimately, but also for myself, the steps that precede step 12. And a couple of key points that I find that I really try to hammer home with the new sponsee. Step 1, admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. So for me, if I'm really trying to have this new recruit identify whether or not they're an alcoholic. Because if you want to tell me that I'm this, I need to know what that is. Like, what is an alcoholic? Why might I be one? If you're saying that I should admit I'm powerless, well, why am I powerless? Why is my life unmanageable? To me, the more knowledge I can give to a new sponsee, especially about what makes them an alcoholic, the more apt they are to identify and then work the solution. Because for me, when I came into this, I knew something was wrong for sure. I mean, I burnt my life to the ground. 12, 13 years straight of just progressive alcoholism getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Till I ended up effectively homeless, no job, failing health, no relationships at all, really, except for the few family members that let me stay on their couch and felt bad for me. So, I had legal trouble. I had all of those things, and I still couldn't stop drinking and using drugs. Could not stop. So clearly something was wrong with me, but I didn't know what. So it was hugely important to me that the person who took me through these steps helped me identify the problem. So if I'm saying I'm powerless, I have to know why I'm powerless. And on in my edition, it's page XXVI in the doctor's opinion. Dr. Silkworth talks about kind of the key point that makes an alcoholic. It says, we believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol in these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. That the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. So that physical allergy was a revelation to me, and it's something I try to show my sponsees, and I try to make very clear. The difference between me and the moderate drinker or the heavy drinker is that I have this allergy. And that allergy means that I no longer respond like a normal person when I take alcohol into my body or any mind-altering substance I've found, because I've done pretty much all of them. And the effect was pretty much the same for me. So in step 1, I want my sponsee to understand this physical allergy. Now, the physical allergy, once they learn about that, then it's simple because, of course, that makes sense, right? And this is a medical condition too. The physical allergy has since been backed up by a lot of science. So they understand that. They're like, well, that's cool, so I just won't drink. Here's my experience with that too. I'm going to drink despite that knowledge, right? Self-knowledge isn't enough for us, and just knowing that I have that allergy is not enough for me. So, and that's specifically because we have a bigger problem than that, right? And I'm going to share my screen real quick. Rather than go through the whole book about this, I'm going to try to sum it up with the cycle of drinking and try to explain some of these things. I think it's this one. No, it's not. Can you guys see my screen? Do you guys see the cycle of drinking? Yes. Okay. So this is a version I just borrowed off the internet, but so I have this physical allergy, and I should just, once I learn that, I should be like, okay, cool. I have a physical allergy, just don't drink. There's a problem with that though, because this particular diagram shows untreated alcoholism. So I'm an alcoholic. I learn I have the allergy, and I'm going to make a resolution to stop. And you can see that on the lower left-hand corner there, right? I'm going to make a firm resolution to not drink again, right? Because clearly, when I drink, I develop a phenomenon of craving that Dr. Silkworth mentions that leads me to a spree, and all bets are off.
James, sorry,
Yes.
we lost the addiction cycle. It went to
Oh, a different thing? Okay,
yeah.
hold
Can
on.
you click on the
What
there?
about now?
That's it. Perfect. Right
Got
there,
it? Okay.
James.
I have two screens going. Sorry. So, okay. You guys see here. So the cycle of drinking can start at, it's a cycle, right? Circle can start at any point, but for our purposes, it starts at resolution to stop, right? I learn I have this allergy. I'm gonna make a resolution to stop, and that should be good enough. Except we have other issues here as alcoholics, right? Despite knowing that I have a body that means I can't take alcohol into my system, I have a mind that dooms me to use. Okay? So that's because we have something called the mental obsession, right? And we have a spiritual malady. This takes lots of forms. I won't get into it too deeply, but instincts out of balance tend to lead me to have this spiritual malady, right? Or they're connected in that way. Restless, irritable discontent, another way to say it. When I'm untreated, that's how I am. So, even though I have this allergy, I'm restless, irritable, discontent. My solution has always been to drink, and that's eventually what I'm going to do. It leads to a mental obsession. I start to think I can drink. I can drink like other people. Maybe I've been away from alcohol long enough to where things start to return to normal. So, of course, I'm good. Of course, I can drink. Right? The mental obsession will lead me to taking or a drink or using a drug every time as an alcoholic. Once again, that phenomenon of craving that I had before begins, and I go on a spree. This diagram has a binge or a bender. Consequences appear, resulting remorse, guilt, and shame. Sometimes that I skip a resolution to stop in that case, and I just keep going because those things do drive me to drink even more. But maybe I'll make another firm resolution. The point is, this is a cycle, and it never stops unless we can get out of it. So I stress to my sponsees that physical allergy that makes me different, right? The spiritual malady that drives the mental obsession that leads to me taking a drink against my will and leads me back to the cycle again. So, admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. I'm powerless because of that allergy and the resulting mental obsession. Because it leads me into this cycle of drinking I can't get out. The cycle of drinking causes the unmanageability, effectively, right? That's why my life's unmanageable. If I'm doing this all the time, and that's all I can really do as a real untreated alcoholic, I'm not doing the things that a normal person would do, like probably take care of bills, be there for my loved ones. I'm not doing any of those things. I might end up in jail. I might end up on the streets. So then our lives are unmanageable. So I explain that as much as I can. I think step one is very important because it allows us to identify the problem. Now, when I'm discussing this with a new recruit, we're getting to step two. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So I've identified a problem. I'm powerless over alcohol. Right? So now I need a power greater than myself. I need a solution to that problem. So, and it says came to believe. So I want to point out that this is something that's a little bit past tense. It doesn't mean that I've told my sponsors I don't think you have to identify right now what that higher power necessarily means to you, or if you're 100% sure of it, because it says we came to believe. And I found that somewhere in steps 4 through 9, they're going to have that spiritual experience or awakening, and they're going to know exactly what that means to them. A lot of people get stuck on step 2, maybe step 3, because they think they need to really fully understand God. And I found that that's not a deal breaker for a sponsee, or for me, it wasn't. But if I want to come to believe that power greater than myself could restore me to sanity, I want to know how and where to find that power. And I always take my, among other pages, I'm kind of skipping through this, but I take my sponsees to page, let's see, 45 to 55. Yes, sorry. So 55. I want them to know where they can find this higher power, because I don't want it to be too nebulous and too grand of a concept for them at the time. I want them to get into 4 through 9. 55, second paragraph down. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves, and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives, are facts as old as man himself. So, where can we find this power? We're going to find it within. The problem is, it says right here that it's blocked. Perhaps God's been there the whole time. I mean, we're still alive after all, despite our alcoholism. But why haven't I been able to access that power? Well, it's been blocked, right? And it gives some examples of how I'm blocked off from God. So I know where to find that power. How do I find that power? I take this new recruit to page 25. In the chapter appropriately titled, There is a Solution. The first paragraph down says, there is a solution, italicized for emphasis. Almost none of us like the self-searching, which is step 4, the leveling of our pride, steps 8 and 9, the confessions of our shortcomings, 5, 6, and 7, which the process requires for its successful consummation. So right here it tells me that the way I access this higher power is steps 4 through 9, right? Which a lot of us refer, or my sponsorship line refers to as the solution. So I'm telling them, you can find God within, but it's blocked. You want to unblock it? I have a solution for you to do that. Okay? Then they just have to make a decision. And there's a few parts to that, but effectively what we're getting at is page 63 and the third step prayer. Like I said, I don't want to take up too much time going through that stuff, but I do want to say that for the most part, the third step prayer is a decision. Right? I've identified why I'm powerless, or I've admitted I'm powerless over alcohol, that my life is unmanageable. I've identified why I'm an alcoholic, why I'm powerless, and why my life is unmanageable. Came to believe that a power that greater than myself could probably help me, because I'm powerless, so I need something greater than myself. I need some other type of power to help me in this situation. So I came to believe that a power greater than myself could do that. I've identified where I can find that higher power and how I can do that. And then I make a decision to do that, to seek out this higher power by doing steps 4 through 9. So 4 through 9 is for somebody else's day, but therein lies the solution that I work with a new recruit. And that brings us to the second part of step 12. So I try to pass this message on to other alcoholics. I take them through those steps. I've mentioned this before. How do I do this? I think it's important to have a plan. I myself, borrowed from my own sponsor, have kind of notes and ways of taking them through this book. We jump around a little bit. We do read, and usually if they stick around, we're reading quite a bit of the book. But I want to get them on steps 4 through 9. The first requirement, I believe, and I said this earlier, that if I'm going to pass this message on, I should be doing step work myself, not just 4 through 9, but I should be continuing to work the solution by working step 10 and growing understanding and effectiveness by doing step 11. I can't teach what I don't know. I can't teach what I don't know. it's funny because there's a gentleman that I work with who I struggled for several weeks when I started this job with a lot of resentments toward this person. And it turns out the problem was mine. Who'd have thought it? It turns out the problem was mine. But he likes to say something to me all the time. And he says, what are the 3 L's in life? I find it wonderful, by the way, that I can learn something from somebody who I used to have a real problem with and a resentment with. And it's directly through doing steps 10 and 11 and making amends promptly. But this person says the 3 L's are listen, learn, and lead. So when I was new and I needed a solution, thank God I was desperate enough to listen and take action on that. I took action and I learned how to do it. I learned how it worked. Once I got enough of that, once I know, I have knowledge, I'm no longer agnostic. Agnostic is without knowledge. Gnostic is no, right? Once I know, specifically once I know my higher power's effectiveness in my life, and I know how the solution works and has worked for me, now I can lead. So listen, learn, and lead. That's what he would always say to me. And I used to hate it because I had a problem with it. But turns out he's a pretty helpful and smart guy. Who'd have thought that? So this step 12 is really about that lead part. And if I really want to know the solution, I'm going to take somebody else through it. I have to. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped this. Okay. Got my notes here. Okay. I can't teach what I don't know, so I better be doing steps 10 and 11. Step 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. I've always been taught, and I find it very true, this is steps 4 through 9, effectively, just something that I do daily. I'm gonna every night I'm gonna be taking inventory, right? And I'm gonna be putting this pen to paper. Some people may find, I still hear people say that they do this in their head. They talk about the spot check inventory. I find that that's the effectiveness of that is just very limited to me. If step 4 is taking a personal inventory, and step 10 is that I continue to do that, then I'm going to do it the same way I did in step 4, which is I'm writing things down. I don't know what's in my head. I can't see it properly, so I write it down. And I'm identifying things that are blocking me off from God, as we discussed earlier. If I'm doing this, and if I create harms, I'm making amends properly, right? I'm asking God to remove the things that are blocking me, like we do in step 6, right? And step 7, humbling, asking Him to remove our shortcomings. If I'm doing those things properly, here's the thing. It's not that I'll be able to pass this message on and the solution on. I'll want to do it. I'll want to do it. That's the magic of this. I want to do this. I see it work in me. Right? And I continue to see the growth that I have from doing it every day. So this is no longer for us that are, those of us who have worked a solution are trying to pass it on. This is something I want to do. I'm compelled to do. Who wouldn't want to share something with somebody that saved their life and constantly works for them, no matter the weather, in fair weather or foul? This works for me. When things are bad, it works. When things are good, it works. When things are just the way they should be, it works. So it's no longer just, I have to do this as part of my program. It's something I want to do. So I'm doing 10 and 11 to be spiritually fit, and I'm compelled to pass this on to somebody else, because my real purpose is to be of maximum service to God and those about us. Right? That's about me. That's my real purpose. One of the primary ways I do it, and the most effective, is to pass the solution on to another alcoholic who's still suffering. So I talked about where to potentially find some of these people to work with. Hospitals, institutions, there's H&I. Obviously, there's meetings. in my opinion, just offer those services wherever you can. If I'm without a sponsee, then I'm missing something from my program. So depending on the need for that, I may have to search high and low for it. A lot of us, my experience too, is that sometimes I have to branch out. I would rely sometimes on going to my previous rehab, right, an institution, to get sponsees. And I think that going to different meetings than I was used to was a way for me to branch out and help others. And also, even things like Zoom. I've at least attempted to sponsor, somebody from the UK over Zoom. I'm using whatever method I can. And I think for me, what it boils down to is always speaking about the solution at meetings, and also if an alcoholic asks me or shows the slightest interest that they may be an alcoholic and want to do this, I'm gonna help them. If I have no time, I'm gonna help them. And that's just me. I realize we all have lives and everything, but I've found, and this was my own sponsor, making these suggestions to me when I was newer to this. He said, you know what I find that happens all the time is if you think you don't have time, God will provide you the right amount of time for it. Because what happens is some people don't continue to do this like I do. The sponsees that I'm working with now may not be there later. Unfortunately, it's just how it works. So if I tell a new person no, and they go off and drink, and then somebody I have been working with also goes off to drink, now there's two people that aren't helped. That new recruit, maybe they would have stuck around, and I won't know unless I say yes and try to help them in some capacity. The third part of step 12 is to practice these principles in all our affairs. And this is something that is I still work on, because at this point I've practiced doing this enough to where I'm pretty efficient at working with another sponsee. But there's always room for improvement, and the question always has to be asked: am I practicing the principles that I have through this solution and working with another sponsee in all of my affairs? So I have some examples of how that works in my life. And once again, I want to just say that by doing this stuff, I find that this typically happens automatically. For the most part, it starts to appear. What I'm about to tell you, right? I'll start to intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle me. So I'm gonna start when school starts for me. I'll talk about school a lot because it's a big part of my life right now. Let's back up. I wanted to go to school for a very long time, even as an alcoholic. I wanted to go back to school. Couldn't do it, obviously, drinking. Didn't work for me. When I got sober, I wanted to do it for my first 2 years, and I couldn't quite do it for various reasons, in my head at least. Fear over a lot of things, right? Oh, well, I have time. There's always the time issue. Am I smart enough? Did I fry my brain too much from drinking, using drugs? Am I going to be able to do any of this stuff? And this is what I found through working a solution 10 and 11, and specifically step 12. I'm going to get to that. I found that a lot of my fears and the things that were driving me towards school, things like pride and driving me away from school, I'd ask myself, am I going to school because just a pride of having a degree? Is this just purely for future material security? Not that those things aren't important, but is that my primary driver of why I'm doing this? Or am I doing it because if I learn in school the same way I learn in the steps, am I going to school so that I can eventually be helpful to someone else? I had to rethink about why I'm doing this. In the same way that I help another alcoholic, my attitude now had to be, I'm doing this to eventually be helpful to somebody else. This isn't just about what I can get out of it. And I only came to this realization through direct solution work. When I finally signed up for school, this is exactly what happened to me. I had just finished a 5th step with a sponsee. And instead of those fears overwhelming me and me thinking too much about going to school, I literally went directly home and I signed up for school. And this is how this works. I wasn't thinking about all the stuff and the fears and the my own self-centered inadequacies that I may have thought. I was very spiritually fit at that point from working immediately before this with another alcoholic, and then I intuitively did what used to baffle me. It used to baffle me why I couldn't sign up for school, like it was some force field blocking. So at work, I'm working on the same resentments that I'm discussing with my sponsees, and I can identify because I'm working a solution along with them. I'm not just telling them what to do. I'm doing it myself. So we have a lot to discuss. That allows me to practice these principles in all my affairs. If I'm doing that on the outside, then I can bring it back into step work and working with somebody else, and vice versa. We're running short of time, but I think the most important thing about step 12, I wish I would have had a chance to read more, but I think the most important thing about step 12 is the same thing with all of the solution, and that is to do it. At the end of the day, somebody told me in a meeting I spoke at the other day, he said, sometimes I have to stop thinking about what's right and just start doing it. When it boils down to it, I learn this as I do it. So the most important thing about step 12 is to do it. It sounds simple, but just do it. You'll make mistakes just as I have along the way, right? And you'll learn from those things. And then you can be more effective. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and quit, considering it seems like we've been here about 40 minutes or so, me talking 45 minutes. Thank you guys very much. If you have anything to add to this, you think I could do better, let me know, please.